May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable and pleasing to the Lord, who is our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. So I must say, I feel a little odd. I feel a little, not quite right. You know, this is now the third sermon in a row that I'm not preaching on the Old Testament. And I feel a little unsettled. Over these past several weeks, a few of you, nice crowd, have gathered every Wednesday evening, and we embarked on a Lenten journey, on what I at first thought was going to be, a little bit of teaching, a little bit of talking, and we'd be done. Well, it did not happen. It did not happen that way. Over the last several weeks, the people who joined, through my well thought out, so at least I thought, curriculum, completely out. And at first, I didn't quite know how to deal with that, you know? It wasn't going as I had planned. But then, I stepped back and I allowed it to happen, and the most amazing, the most phenomenal thing happened. We started sharing with one another what the Eucharist, the Holy Eucharist, meant to each and every one of us. Some more, some a little less, but we got into this wonderful sharing and wonderful talking about this central mystery, the central symbol of faith that we have, the Eucharist. And tonight I want to share a little bit of this journey with you. I think we first started talking about sacraments as being something like symbols or symbolic actions. Now, what does that really mean? Well, it means that a thing or an action that we do may have one meaning, a regular meaning, but then through prayer and through how we interpret this as a community, we give it additional meaning that the thing or the action in and of itself would not have. And that's the basic concept, if you will, of that which we call sacramentality. Because in this thing and in this action now, what I like to call what we experience, the thing itself or in the action itself becomes what I like to call translucent. You know, the light shines through, translucent to the presence and to the love of God in our lives. And so they're way more than things that we remember or things that we do. And one of the great theologians, sacramental theologians of, well, not our time anymore, but recent times, he was still alive when I was studying, Herbert Vorgrimler, he said that if God desires to be present to human beings, God's presence must create a symbolic, there you have the word, a symbolic expression for itself in order that it can be real, so that we can experience it as real for human beings, since the complete disparity between God and the human makes an unmediated presence and communication of God impossible. God is so the other of what we are, that if we were to experience God face to face, all throughout the Old Testament we never have anyone experiencing God face to face. And even in the New Testament we don't have anyone other than Jesus who experiences God face to face. And therefore now in Jesus we believe we have seen the face of God as clearly as we can as human beings. So that's what we mean when we talk about sacraments as being symbols of the presence, symbols of the love of God in our lives. And today's liturgy is all about symbolism. I mean, we already have the chairs there. We have the symbolic washing of feet. Now, you know, in and of itself, the action of washing one's feet is hopefully, probably, something that we all do once a day. Most of us, I would hope, would wash our feet. So it's a thing that we do to be clean. Jesus does that too, tonight. But you know what? It's not about cleanliness. And in the gospel that we just heard, Jesus makes that absolutely clear when Peter says to him, well, you know, whilst you're at it, do my head and do my hands and do the rest of me. And Jesus said, no, that's not what this is about. It's not about being clean, just being clean. So now this action takes on symbolic character because we give it meaning. Jesus gave it meaning that it didn't have before. That is, when I do this to you, for you, I am your servant. I'm not looking at rank. I'm not looking at position. I'm not looking at who is the master, who is the slave. None of this is important. I am giving you all I have, every last bit, and I'm there for you. That is what I'm sharing with you. Not the cleaning. We can do that ourselves. But that unconditional love that is beyond measure, that completely ignores and forgets about itself and only lives for the other. And then Jesus says something quite important. Now, I've shown you what to do. And now it's your turn. And just in case we don't get it, and history tells us, and personal experience tells us, that more often than not we don't get it, Jesus puts the new commandment at the end of this action. Love one another as I have loved you. That is the key that unlocks the symbolic action that we remember today. So, then, however, that's one symbolic action. But tonight I really want to focus on another symbolic action that we do, and that we do on a regular basis every Sunday, most of us, and then some of us even more often, and that is the celebration of the Holy Eucharist. Now on Good Friday, on Maundy Thursday, we often preach about the symbolism of the washing of feet. Because first of all, that is a symbolism that still speaks to us clearly today. I mean, that's something we get, at least intellectually. Whether or not we do it all the time is a different story, but we get it. So that is something that we can easily relate to. The grand mystery, in my opinion, of this night is the institution of the Holy Eucharist. And in fact, the washing of the feet, for those of you who were here last night, interprets the Eucharist. These are two interconnected symbols of faith. But tonight, I really would like to explore a little more the Holy Eucharist. Because we do it, we celebrate it every Sunday. And if we do something frequently all the time, there is a danger that we just do it and we're not asking, we are not really reflecting on the deeper meaning of it anymore. And that's a good thing. If something like this becomes second nature, that's a good thing. But the danger in it is that we don't really ask what it is that we are doing and what's happening there. So, in order to look a little deeper tonight into the symbolism of the Holy Eucharist, I want to invite you on a pilgrimage. We're all going to go to Jerusalem. So you got your suitcase and you got your ticket, and off we go. And where I want to take you is, I want to take you to the old city of Jerusalem, to a place where since antiquity Christians have commemorated that this was the place where Jesus had his Last Supper with his disciples. The Last Supper room, or the upper room, in the old city of Jerusalem. And the tradition, as far as we know, goes back to about the 4th Byzantine time, to about the 4th century of our era. That's when there's the first mention of this room. And was it, as far as we know, nice little room, stairs leading up to it. And then the Crusaders came in the 10th and 11th century. And they looked at it and they thought, well, it's really not much to it. It's a tiny little room. So we got to make something of it. And they took the roof off, and they put in columns and then a beautiful vaulted ceiling. So they made it this big hall, probably not where Jesus was celebrating, or that room of that kind of grandeur, proportion. Thank you, my souffleuse. Thank you. Where Jesus was celebrating. So something went a little different there. And now it was this big hall, this beautiful, beautiful space. And then a few centuries ago, we don't exactly when, they put plaster on the top of those columns that on which the vaulted ceiling was resting, probably to blend in with that ceiling, and that stayed there for a long time. But then, in recent times, they really started to have problems with that blessed plaster. Because as you know, it keeps breaking, there gets cracks, and then little pieces fall off, and then late in the 1980s, the Israeli Antiquity Authority finally decided, we've had it, fixing up that plaster, we're just going to take it down because there's got to be something underneath it. And so they did. And when the plaster was removed, there was this amazing relief cast in stone that they were looking at. And it was just absolutely beautiful, breathtaking. And I figured, why not show it to you? Now, we didn't take a hammer and get the relief out, but we have our local artist here, Jean Ann, and I gave her a picture of the relief, and she drew this amazing piece of art. That's what was hidden underneath. And you have it actually, you have a black and white copy in your order of service. So what is it? It's the ancient Christian legend of the pelican. And what we see here is, we see an adult pelican with his wings kind of letting them hang down. And we have two young pelicans on either side, and these young pelicans put their beaks into the chest of the adult pelican, and they draw from it. And then all of them stand on death masks. Now, the symbolism behind that is, the legend tells that the pelican is the only bird in creation, the only creature, in fact, that when there is a drought, a famine, when there's nothing to eat, the adult pelican will give itself to its young. Allow its young to feed of its flesh and drink its blood. And in so doing, they conquer death. The young have life, and they have it abundantly. Does that sound like something we sometimes say? I think it does. And that is what the early Christians understood the Eucharist to be. Jesus, on the night that he was betrayed, he took a piece of bread. Piece of bread. Why would he take a piece of bread? Wouldn't it be nicer, more festive, to take a good rack of lamb or a nice chop, preferably not pork in those days? But no, he took bread. And I think the reason he took bread is because that's a staple. That's something that we all have, or should have at least. And if we don't, if not every one of us has a piece of bread, then we as a community, I think, have failed. He simply took bread, that which we all should have. And he took some wine. Now, in antiquity, wine was easier to keep than water because of the alcohol in it. It wouldn't go bad as quickly. So again, something that everyone should have. So very ordinary, very simple things. And then he did something with it. And that's how they become symbols of faith. First, he said thanks. He gave thanks for these two things. And the prayer that he used, we still use today in our liturgy. You often don't hear it, but tonight you will hear it. You will hear the Hebrew and you will hear the English. He gave thanks. And then he broke it. And then he gave it to his friends. And then he said something to give it meaning. This is no longer just a piece of bread. This is something more now. This is the body. This is I. And this cup now is not just a drink that we have, but it is my very life essence. It is everything that I've lived for, all the love that I can possibly give you. That's how the two symbols connect. All the love that I can possibly give you. And all of this is for you. I give it away. Why? So that you, that I, have life. And not just a little bit, but that I have it abundantly. Abundantly. So, this beautiful picture, this picture of the pelican, reminds us still today and calls us today, calls into question, asks the question of us, what is it that gives me life? What is it that is the essence of my life? And that is maybe the question that we should ask ourselves when we celebrate the Eucharist. Not just what's going to happen there. You know, the theologians fussed about that. Is it real presence? Is it symbolic presence? Is it social presence? Let the theologians worry about that. What is it that the Eucharist is in my life? What gives life to me? And maybe looking at this picture and tonight receiving the piece of bread and having a drink from the cup, we might ask ourselves, and we might come to that understanding that, yeah, this is not just a piece of bread. This is that which gives me life, which gives life to me, which gives life to us. And that experience after Easter was the reason why the first Christians went back to that very same room right after Easter. They went back to that very same room, and there they sat, and they broke bread, and they were having a meal, and they were rejoicing. They were rejoicing in the death and resurrection of Jesus, because they knew that's where their strength came from. That's where their life came from. And that has continued to this day. And every time we do it, we know that Jesus is in our midst. Jesus is the one who gives us this life. And then when we celebrate this faithfully, and when we do as Jesus did that night, that is, be servants to one another and to the world, and that's how these two symbols connect, then Jesus, through us, through the community of the faithful, becomes the life for the world. That is our calling, and that is our gift, the gift that Jesus gave us that night. Amen.